Good morning, everyone. This is it. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the 8th annual SLO Symposium. Indeed, it has been 8 years since the first event. I'm very happy to report that the symposium focused on teaching and learning has only been growing ever since. Last year at Monterey Peninsula College, we had over 200 attendees. And as of today, there are 483 registered guests for this event. My name is Yare Kiano, and I'm the SLO coordinator at Santa Ana College. And also what's different this year is that the event has been designed and organized by a team of people. Have you received any emails about the SLO Symposium recently? Without them, it would just not be possible to hold an event of this magnitude. I'm really grateful for all of us who contribute to this event. The theme for this year's symposium is ensuring equitable learning. With that in mind, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers, huge networking opportunity after lunch. We've never tried that before. And the dynamic panel discussion to end the day. I am sure that tomorrow's sessions will be just as exciting. With that, I would like to pass it on to Stacy Teeters, the Guided Pathways Regional Coordinator Extraordinaire, to introduce the SLO Symposium planning team and to talk about the logistics of the event. Welcome all. Stacy.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Yarek. My name is Stacy Teeters, and I'm one of the Guided Pathways Regional Coordinators for the Foundation for California's Community Colleges, serving all of the regions of California. And specifically, I'm located here in the San Diego Imperial region. We are so excited to have you here this morning, and it has been a pleasure being able to plan and collaborate on this important event with all of my colleagues. And I want to pass it over to one of our other important planning members, Enrique, to introduce himself and also the planning team.
On behalf of Fresno City College, faculty, staff, and administration, I'd like to welcome you. My name is Enrique Jauregui. I am the SLO coordinator for this wonderful institution. Our priority is to place students first and to ensure the lifelike learning needs of our diverse population. Once again, welcome. Now it is with great honor to recognize and thank the planning committee who contribute to the 8th annual SLO Symposium. Everyone worked with diligence and perseverance to have this first Zoom SLO Symposium. My gratitude also extends to the incredible Fresno City College faculty, classified professional staff that helped make this event happen. Thank you all. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the support received from our symposium sponsors. Listed here are the institutions and organizations that collaborated to bring this event to all of you. We all wish you a notable and meaningful SLO Symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. I'm going to also take care of some quick house cleaning or housekeeping items here in terms of the conference and symposium events today and tomorrow. One of the things we encourage you to do is be active on social media, on our different social media platforms. Utilize the conference hashtags SLO Symposium 2021 and ensure equitable learning, as that is our conference theme, and we hope you enjoy those discussions online and with your colleagues as well. We also have several outcomes that we are hoping that you walk away with having attended this symposium this year. First being, we want you to really engage with the presenters, with what's being discussed, and utilize that and bring it into your practice. We hope that this is helpful, useful, inspiring, but we also hope that you connect with other people, connect with the presenters to be able to continue this work moving forward with your colleagues in all of the effort to make sure that students are walking away and having an equitable learning experience on each of your campuses. In terms of this year, we also have specific breakout session tracks that you can see here, and they're also in the conference program as well. Some really exciting presentations that fit into these different categories. So if one particularly speaks to you, definitely be sure to check out the sessions in that particular track. And then lastly, for the housekeeping this morning, here's today's agenda. So you can see we're starting out with our keynote, but we also have breaks structured throughout the day as well as a lunch break. We encourage you to look through the program to plan ahead because there is a lot of great stuff happening during the day, and also look through and we hope to see you at our lunch networking discussion that's going to be happening during the lunch break as well. Make sure for all of these sessions to register via Zoom because each room has its own unique Zoom link. So with that, I will turn it back to Yarick. You're muted, Yarick.
Sorry, thank you very much. The keynote speaker for this year's symposium is an experienced higher education leader serving the largest system of higher education in the nation, California Community Colleges. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Aisha Lowe, Vice Chancellor of Educational Services and Support. Dr. Lowe.
Thank you very much, Yarick. Good morning to everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you today, and a special thank you to the planning team that has worked so diligently to put this event together. So I'm excited to be here with you all this morning. I'm going to pull up and share my slides. All right. I'm excited to be here with you all this morning to really talk to this very important theme of ensure equitable learning and what that means for us to ensure equitable learning. So this is a graphic that I hope we are all very familiar with at this point, really looking at the vision for success for the California Community Colleges and the Chancellor's Office and our core commitments. We have set audacious goals for particular areas where we want to see change in the outcomes that our students are experiencing, and when we want to close persistent gaps that have been lingering within our system over many years. And we have made some progress in all of these areas. Hopefully in 2019, which feels like it was eons ago now, you were able to see the state of the system that Chancellor Oakley put out to give an update on where we are in meeting all of these core commitments that focus on student goals, designing and deciding with the student in mind, pairing high expectations with high support, making sure that we're making data-driven decisions, owning student performance, and focusing in on innovation and action as we partner across the system. In particular, the vision for success is very much then connected with the guided pathways framework. So this visual may be new for some of you. You may not have seen this before, but this visual is really bringing together the vision for success and guided pathways and really showing that overlay between fiscal reform, programs, policy connections, how we utilize all of these levers for change to achieve the vision for success goals through the framework of guided pathways. So bringing it all together so that we can see and understand that these are not separate and distinct initiatives, but that these all come together in a unified framework, and really guided pathways being the theory of change or the change framework for achieving the goals of the vision for success. So of course, I love that for this particular conference, you have honed in on equity. That has certainly been a core and important theme for our system. Focusing in on equity, focusing in on the equitable changes that we want to see within our system. Changes that we have all been working on for many years, right? This is not new work for us. We have been working on this for many years. But what we did in 2019 within our system and really across the nation was really hone in on and really crystallize our focus around equity. Having courageous conversations about the ways in which persistent equity gaps have lingered within our systems, and really challenging ourselves as educators, challenging ourselves to really dig into this work with renewed vigor and renewed focus, and to really highlight this and spotlight this as a central focus for us all to work on, because we all want to see the day when these equity gaps no longer exist. For all of us that have been in education for a long time, I know my entire career has been in education, this discussion around these equity gaps has been a constant and persistent discussion. And there's been lots of positive changes across the realm of educational reform. And we seem to be slowly chipping away, but often find it difficult to have substantial, right, or significant change. And so we're crystallizing that focus and really digging into what do we need to change personally, professionally, and in our institutions, so that we can hopefully, I certainly hope, it is my dream, see a day where these equity gaps no longer exist, where students' outcomes are no longer correlated with their racial or ethnic background or their socioeconomic status, right, or their language background, where we can see these persistent, nasty correlations finally dissipate, hopefully within our time. And so this is an equity framework that we've been looking at the Chancellor's office. You may have seen this in some other presentations of this overlap between the personal work that we must all do as individuals to combat equity, combat inequity. I love to quote something that our Deputy Chancellor, Dr. Daisy Gonzalez, always says: policies and procedures don't actually change institutions, people do, right? We are the core, we are the center of our institutions, and we are ultimately the individuals that are going to create the change that we want to see. And so that starts with that personal work, but then professionally within our roles, interrogating our practices, interrogating our policies, pushing against the status quo and making sure that we are utilizing equity-based practices effectively to support our students. And then of course, at an institutional level, we are interrogating our policies, our practices, our curricular, and our structures to make sure that they are equitable and achieving the outcomes we desire for our students. But in line with your theme, I really want to hone in my time with you today on our Guided Pathways pillar for ensuring learning, and love this focus on equity, adding in ensure equitable learning. I may actually pitch to our office, maybe that should be a permanent change. Let's get that equitable in there permanently, that we want to ensure equitable learning. And as you all know, the Guided Pathways framework is exactly that, right? It's a framework. We as educators still have to put some detail, right? Some structures, some plans of action around that framework to really understand, what does that mean, right? What does it mean for us to clarify the path? What does it mean for us to help students stay on the path? And what does it mean here for Pillar 4 for us to ensure equitable learning? What is our work in actually making that idea come to life? So I want to share with you some of the things that I think are core for this pillar in particular about what do we do to ensure equitable learning? How do we actually achieve that? And I think there are four core areas in which we ensure equitable learning. It's about placement, right? Making sure students have access to those learning experiences, designing that learning journey, engaging in strategic assessment and evaluation, and then ultimately entering into that cycle of continuous improvement and innovation in response to what we learn from our assessments and our evaluations. So digging into each one of these, so along this way of ensuring equitable learning, one of the things we have to attend to is that we ensure equitable placement. We know that this has been a massive undertaking for the California Community Colleges system. We have in recent years undergone a basic massive overhaul of one of our practices around placement. And while there was quite a controversy in history about how that came to be and why it came to be, and the process of implementing Assembly Bill 705, we are now entering into that space where we are implementing, and it's time for us to evaluate our practices. And as we are doing that, early data at the beginning of this implementation cycle is showing us that ensuring equitable placement is a part of the process of ensuring learning. When students are placed equitably, their path to completion is expedited and persistent opportunity gaps begin to diminish. And so early data from the implementation of AB 705 is showing us that more students are taking and completing gateway math and English courses. We see that enrollment in transfer level English has increased from 38% in 2015 to 96%, and in math from 21% to 78%. So we're now able to say that the majority of our students are accessing transfer level math and English. Completion rates have also improved from 27% to 61% in English and from 14% to 40% in math. Very impressive increases. And overall, our success rates have also increased from 34% to 66% in English and from 19% to 47% in math. So in all of that, we see that when we eliminate opportunity gaps, we can diminish equity gaps. And we're seeing similar increases no matter a student's high school performance. So no matter what GPA band from high school they entered into our system with, we're seeing these increases, and we're seeing it across all subgroups. And so this data is promising. It's encouraging. We, of course, will continue to implement with fidelity and continue to assess implementation to figure out what's working and what's not working and where we need to make improvements. When we think about placement and we think about equitable placement, we really do have a moral obligation to provide all students that opportunity to access high levels of education and then to support their success. And that support and that success we know happens in the classroom. And so that to me is the next important piece of what it means to ensure equitable learning is really to support the planning and engagement process that happens within the back and forth, the iterative process of teaching and learning that occurs within our classrooms. So the second piece that I think is essential to ensuring equitable learning is that we ensure an outcomes-based learning journey. So this is an area where I believe for all of us as educators, we are certainly in higher ed in this space where we're really asking difficult questions about the way that teaching and learning happens in higher education. And how do we transform the way that we engage in teaching and learning for this time, right? As you all know, both in K-12 and in higher ed, we are operating in fairly antiquated systems, right? We have systems of education, ways of being and doing on our campuses that were established decades ago for a world that no longer exists. And part of the difficult work before us today as educators is how do we re-envision an educational system and a classroom experience for today, right? For the year 2021, for the 2021 student that is coming into our classroom that is so different than the students that came into our classrooms 20, 30 years ago. And the world is so different. Society, the workforce is so different than when we created our colleges and our systems and our processes and our ideologies about teaching and learning. So we're at a very innovative time within education, but we're also at a very difficult time. We are being challenged to rethink who we are. We are being challenged to rethink what we do and to re-envision what education looks like in this time for these students and these educators of this day. So one of the things that I think we need to do is to really push ourselves towards outcomes-based learning journeys, right? Understanding that learning is not a destination, it's a journey. I love this quote you see here at the bottom of the slide from John Dewey, that growth is often regarded as having an end instead of being the end, right? So how do we shift our thinking around teaching and learning that it's about growth, it's about continuous improvement, really focusing teaching and learning on those outcomes. What are the skills and the competencies that our students need to have and need to be able to demonstrate? And so as you look into some of the literature on outcomes-based learning, and in particular, growing literature around competency-based education, which of course is an effort that we're moving forward for our system as well, you see these elements about really shifting the way that we do planning, the way that we structure our learning journeys, backwards designing from the outcomes to the inputs, so that content, lessons plans, activities are really being carefully crafted based on the framing of the outcomes that we want to focus on being more demonstrable or performative in nature. Shifting within our process of teaching and learning from an information pedagogy to a mastery pedagogy, right? We have students who are highly interactive outside of the classroom. I think about the young people that we'll have in the future, these digital natives, the things that they are able to navigate and do, right? 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds seem to know how to operate our smartphones better than we do. Those students are going to end up in our classroom, and they're going to be looking for a hands-on interactive experience that mirrors the sort of hands-on interaction that they do on a regular basis outside of the classroom. So how do we evolve our learning journeys, our classroom experiences from that passive reception to that active engagement, so that they are having those hands-on experiences in the classroom and see the classroom as an extension of those interactive life experiences, not a place where they have to step in and shut all that down and simply receive information. So these tenets you see here, these are often cornerstones of competency-based education. And as you hopefully know, we did recently in November of last year, the Board of Governors approved a set of regulations to establish direct assessment competency-based education as an option within our system. We are now from the Chancellor's office designing and launching a pilot. I want to very much thank our partners from the Academic Senate and our statewide curriculum committee who really dug in very hands-on to help bring that to life. But beyond that initiative, right, sort of adding competency-based education to our suite of options, which some colleges will choose to do and some will not, this is really about how do we infuse those tenets of competency-based education across what we do in teaching and learning, right? How do we shift to really this outcomes-based learning journey? Another key element here then, as we want to ensure equitable learning, is that we ensure authentic assessment and performative evaluation. This has certainly been a hot topic in education as of late, right? How do we elevate assessment as a tool of learning, not simply a measure of it, right? How does assessment become a part of that learning journey and that learning process, and not just this outcome that we gather at the end of a learning journey? So we're really talking about assessment that not only assesses students' learning, but actually teaches students in the process of completing assessment, they're actually learning, and also improves their skills and their understanding of course content, and helps them to self-evaluate where they are and what they need to continue to work on. We want to build from formative to summative assessments across a scaffolded learning journey. We are all familiar with these different forms of assessments. We often focus solely on summative assessments, those evaluations of student learning and knowledge and proficiency that often come at the conclusion of an instructional period. But essential to ensuring equitable learning is that we engage in more formative assessment. How are we assessing students' learning and their understanding along the learning journey in a way that those assessments are actually informing our classroom practice and informing the experience that students are going to have? So with those formative assessments, we're really talking about tools that we use to identify misconceptions, struggles, learning gaps along the way within the learning journey, so that we can assess how to close those gaps before we get to the end of the learning journey. I don't know about you all, but for those of us who have served as faculty, I have most certainly had the experience of getting to the end of a course giving that final exam. And while I did work hard and put in much effort to make sure that my final exam fit into this category of an authentic performative assessment, even then, receiving that information back, seeing the successes, being very proud and excited about the ways in which my students were able to demonstrate their learning, but seeing where the gaps still remained, but then it all falls flat because the course is over. All right, the final exam has been given. While I certainly could send them emails about gaps I saw in their final exam, they probably wouldn't have read them at that point, right? So with formative assessments, it's really about building that into the learning journey earlier so that assessment can actually inform the learning journey and students' learning process. Within that, we want to involve the students in that recursive, that iterative process of learning, assessing, and adjusting. With formative assessments, it really helps us to take stock of students' current mastery in relation to those desired outcomes so that we can shift the learning journey as needed. And research in the area of authentic assessment has actually found that these types of assessments actually bolster a student's ability to take ownership of their learning, right? When they understand that the goal is improvement and progress, it helps to shift their focus from simply achieving a grade to really engaging in the learning. And then lastly, how can we use multifaceted assessments that are not just of discipline content, but also of applicable competencies and those very important 21st century skills, right? As educators, we are much more than purveyors of content. We are shaping hearts and minds, and we're building futures. And as a former president of mine used to always say, students, when they leave our institutions, they should be able to read, write, think, and speak effectively and be highly employable. And for us within our community college context, I would add to that, and also be ready for transfer. I love this little graphic. I think it's a funny one. But it's important as we think about this very important piece around assessment, that we understand that we really want to utilize assessment to measure how well students are applying their knowledge and skills and abilities that we are providing them with to authentic problems, to the sorts of scenarios and problems that they're going to face when they leave our institutions and go out into the real world, where their ability to take a test won't really matter much. And so that's really the core of what we're trying to achieve with authentic assessments and performative evaluation. You see this graphic here, which I will certainly not read to you. There's so much literature and information within the world of educational research around authentic assessment, what it is, why it's essential, and how we do it. And you see some of that here before you. But this is an area where hopefully as educators, we can really lean into and push into this area around establishing authentic assessments, right? And when we say assessment, we're not talking about exams specifically, but all of the ways in which we assess learning, all of the assignments, the activities that we engage in the learning journey to assess where our students are so that it can inform their journey and our practice. And so with an authentic assessment, whether it be an assignment, an exam, or some activity, we want to push in there because of the benefits that it provides for students in the learning process, and also the benefit when you're a faculty member, the information that it gives you to help you to navigate that learning journey. So this requires, these sort of assignments, these sort of assessments really require an application of what students have learned. Right? So they're not regurgitating information, they are actually demonstrating that they can apply and make use of the information that they have learned, and how can they transfer that learning to new situations. These sort of assessments really demands a judgment to determine what information and skills are relevant and how they should be used, which is an important transferable skill for our students to have as they go off into workforce. These might often be a little messy, right? Assessments of this type really focus on complex real-world situations and their accompanying constraints, but again, preparing our students for what they will experience within the real world, and wherever possible, it's helpful for us to also involve real-world audience of stakeholders and clients that our students might engage with once they are outside of the college classroom. So of course, as we talk about leaning into authentic assessment, performative evaluation, we are in no way saying that the conventional test has no place. Conventional tests, conventional exams do have a role to play within the teaching and learning journey within our college courses. But we want to ensure that those are not taking the place of authentic assessments and really leaning more into this work and infusing this into our classrooms. So then last among these four is this ensuring a continuous cycle of improvement and innovation. So once we have backwards mapped from the outcomes to the inputs to design our learning journey, we are in the midst of implementing that learning journey. As we are engaging in that learning journey through formative assessments, we are assessing, reevaluating, and shifting our practice along the way, and then ultimately at the end of a particular learning journey, more fully, summatively assessing our students' experience and their outcomes so that we can innovate. And being in that constant iterative cycle of this improvement and innovation. So when we talk about continuous improvement, again, another area where the literature has a lot to say about what that means and how we engage in that. And in many places, you'll see the literature really talk about this as a formal methodology, right, of improvement science, where within a particular system, or in our case, for those who are in the classroom, we're really improving the learning journey and improving students' outcomes through this process of gathering data, reflecting on data, engaging stakeholders in that discussion. That's a piece we often miss when we're talking about our classrooms, actually engaging our students in what we're seeing of their outcomes and in getting their feedback on what we're seeing and any places of low performance. And then planning for those targeted improvements and repeating the cycle as we continuously improve. So we're looking to identify where are those problems, whether it's a problem of student attention and motivation, whether it's a problem of student performance, identifying what those problems are that we're experiencing within the learning journey and this learning process, and really identifying those within the entire ecosystem, right? Those issues that we see in the classroom typically are not isolated, right, episodes or incidences. They're typically symptomatic of something that's happening more systemically. So evaluating within the ecosystem and with all that in mind, working then to improve our practices or our policies or our processes within the classroom, repeatedly testing and questioning our own assumptions, our own ideology, and really investigating in what ways might my own assumptions be a part of what's contributing to the issues or the problems or the lack that I'm seeing. And then ultimately using all of that information to help to tweak our practice. And with all that information, that final piece really of ensuring learning is us then innovating, right? Breaking out of the box we have sometimes been put into of the way things have to go, the way a classroom should look, what teaching and learning should look and feel like, and really innovating and leaning into what I hope we feel as an exciting opportunity to re-envision what teaching and learning is and what it looks like. So we see that in efforts that we have underway right now as a system with competency-based education and credit for prior learning. But there's even further that we can push around the area of innovation within teaching and learning. How do we start to shift to more of a personalized educational experience, right? Having these tailored, more individualized learning plans for students. How do we lean into things like focusing in on strength-based education? I've seen some great pilots move forward, more so on the K-12 side, of schools actually adopting a strengths-based framework for education, having their students take the Strengths Finders assessment, really focusing their students in on what's right with them and what's great about them and the outcomes that they're then seeing in students' motivation and students' performance because of the use of that strengths-based framework. Of course, we know it's important that we be very intentional about attaching and connecting our curriculum to workforce demands, right? At the end of the day, all of education is about workforce, right? We've sort of had this historical false dichotomy between what happens in the classroom and workforce development, right? A dichotomy that we need to tear down. While we all certainly hope that our students have a love of learning and that part of the reason why they are on our campus and engaging in higher education is because they want to learn, the truth is pretty much probably all of our students are looking for a change in their career and their employability and their life outcomes in the workforce outside of our campuses. So all of education is workforce development. So how do we make those connections stronger between what we are doing in the classroom and what students will actually have to do when they are no longer on our campuses and they are out in the workforce? And how do we also focus in on innovating for infusing those life skills, those soft skills, and all of which are transferable skills into the learning journey as well? So I will close with this as we bring it all together, again, around your theme about how do we ensure equity within the learning process? It happens in the classroom. I say this all the time over the course of my career and when I've had various opportunities for speaking engagements or doing training in particular with faculty. I say this all the time to faculty members, right? Your role on the campus is one of the single most important roles because all of those who have been in the classroom, and I can attest to this, right? We know that once you walk into the classroom, that is really your domain, right? And you can design that experience to be whatever you want it to be. So equity really happens in the classroom. Now, we all have a role to play in that process, right? Our counselors have a role to play in that process because they're a part of the placement process, right? Our many SLO coordinators who are here are certainly a part of the process because you will really be the leaders who can help to shift us in this direction and sort of shift the way we think about planning learning journeys and how we assess and evaluate, how we improve and innovate. But it all really happens in the classroom. So ensuring learning is how we achieve equity. And we achieve equity by what happens in the classroom. So I just really want to encourage everyone that we lean into these areas. How do we ensure equity in how we place students and how we design our learning journeys, in how we assess and evaluate, and ultimately get to that improvement and continuous innovation for our system and for our students. So thank you, everyone. With that, we can shift to questions and engage in some discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lowe. That was such an inspiring conversation to have about really how we can ensure learning through equity, right? And how we're moving past and we're shifting from a pedagogy of information to a pedagogy of mastery. We have a few questions from you, for you. I'm going to start and then I'll kick it off to Yarek, who can continue, if you don't mind. Our first question is, how do you see initiatives like competency-based education shaping models for teaching and learning in the near future?
Yes, that is a great question. So I mentioned that briefly, but didn't go deep into our efforts around competency-based education. And so we talk about scaffolding learning journeys. Competency-based education is really one of those opportunities system-wide for us to scaffold our system in transitioning the way we think about teaching and learning, right? So we're beginning with a pilot, right? We'll have a small group of colleges, those early implementers that are ready to jump in and roll up their sleeves and really dig into the details of establishing these competency-based education degree programs. But in addition to that, even as we think about the pilot, the collaborative that we're designing right now, we are designing it in such a way where we really want it to operate more like a professional learning community, so that as those participating colleges engage in a learning journey around things like what is authentic and performative assessment, around how do you identify competencies? How is that different from or similar to our student learning outcomes? And how do we transition from SLOs to competencies? We are going to design that whole experience in such a way that when we have these opportunities for learning, those are opened up more broadly to the system, right? So it connects with part of what I was talking about earlier, that on the one hand, we have an initiative where colleges can establish a competency-based education degree program, but we want to infuse throughout the system thinking of teaching and learning in that way, right? Shifting to focusing on outcomes more than inputs, shifting to focus on mastery and the ways in which our students need to demonstrate their skills and abilities in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So it's really about leveraging this opportunity for competency-based education to really push us and shift us in the way we think about teaching and learning in general.
And then I'm going to blend the next two questions together because faculty are really intrigued by this idea about what we can do in the classroom and how equity can happen in the classroom. And you know, we're oftentimes we see kind of authentic assessment happen in a variety of disciplines, but some faculty believe that it could happen and is currently happening more in CTE disciplines, and are really interested in understanding how we can model some of those best practices and how we could apply authentic and applied assessment to GE areas. So I think faculty are interested in maybe getting a few examples and also thinking about how we're able to overcome some of the challenges that faculty face in the classroom, like how we can redesign our courses to have more authentic assessments while also facing challenges like large classroom size and enrollment, et cetera.
No, definitely all good questions, right? Because the it's a wonderful sort of ideology. The questions come down to, well, how do we actually do this, right? And it certainly is no easy task, and it's work for us, right? It is work for the educator to commit the time to dig into this and figure it out. But I love this question, right? Because when we think about authentic assessment, performative evaluation, we do often think about physical tasks, right? Or things that fit in the CTE area. So let's talk about what this can look like across the curriculum. All right, so I will pick on psychology as a discipline because that is my discipline. So thinking of psychology, right? So when I was in the classroom teaching psychology, part of it was thinking about, okay, when my students leave my institution, what are they actually going to have to do, right? Because no matter what the field is, whether it's one of the social sciences, whether it's our more technical sciences, whether it's English, whether it's math, whatever students are majoring in, as they go off into their career, there are things they're going to have to do, right? And we as the educators, part of our work, if we aren't knowledgeable about those things, would be to research that, right? So if I have a student who has decided they want to major in math or they want to major in psychology, part of my role as an educator is to research and figure out what does the career trajectory look like for those students, and what are the things that they might actually do once they leave higher ed and go off into workforce. And so that's part of the additional workload for us, right? Is doing that research, making those connections, and understanding what does work look like for my psychology student. So in a field like psychology, that is vast, right? A student who majors in psychology could go so many directions. They could focus more on the research direction, right? Becoming a researcher within psychology. They might be future faculty members, future researchers. They could go more the clinical direction. And then within clinical, there's a whole set of possibilities. So part of that designing those authentic assessments and those authentic learning experiences is researching what those options are, and then what are the skills that they are going to need. Now, this of course connects to the need for us to differentiate education within the classroom. So if I'm teaching psychology and I know that my students could end up in 10 different places, right? They could end up as a marriage and family counselor, they could end up with a more with a PsyD and actually be counseling individuals who are dealing with mental disorder, or they can end up as a professor themselves, or psychology takes you many places. They could end up developing curriculum. They could go lots of different places, right? Then it's about thinking about how do I create learning experiences and assessments that are going to help them start to practice the kind of skills they're going to have to do in that real world. So one thing that's going to be essential no matter where they go in psychology, they are going to have to be able to, I'll say, for example, to interact with research. No matter where they go in psychology, that's core to the psychology discipline. So what sort of learning activities and then assessments am I going to do in the classroom to ensure that my students know how to engage with research? They know how to actually understand it and interpret it, and then they know how to apply it to a scenario, right? And creating those sort of activities that lead them through that process and give them feedback is one example. And I'm sure across the disciplines, if we get a group of faculty together, they can come up with those ideas, right? And making those connections. So it's about being intentional about doing that research, understanding where our students are going, and then having the discussions with our colleagues. Please don't do this alone. Pull people in, pull in your colleagues to have those conversations, to co-create together what that might look like, to have those more performative evaluations and those more authentic activities in the classroom.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Lowe, for the insightful, inspirational answers. The question on my end is going to be about non-credit. In this universe of skill attainment, reaching out to colleagues, building community within our institutions, how do you see the role of non-credit with WIOA, CAPE funding, things that are happening? There's the whole universe of students who are really at the gate, so to speak, of the system, ready to go in many cases. And the question that's probably going to be asked after this, I see in the chat here, will have to do with tuition and cost of access. Mm-hmm. If you could please address these.
Yes, definitely. Another great question, right? So this is another place where I feel we've, again, created a false dichotomy, right, between non-credit and credit. And so when we think about all that I've discussed today, and in particular, what we're trying to move forward with competency-based education, how do we, again, tear down these walls, these false dichotomies, and create seamless paths, right? Very much connected to all of our work around guided pathways, that no matter where our students enter our institution, which means if they enter on the non-credit side of the house, right? What is the pathway that we have designed for them, right? So I think it's important that we really shift and make that a central part of our planning, right? That non-credit is not this separate thing over there that's for these students who are doing X, Y, and Z, right? How do we understand all of our students, our clients, no matter where they enter into our institution, that we have a clear pathway for them? Where is this pathway leading to, right? And how do we, again, take the time, put in the effort to design those pathways carefully and intentionally? And then, of course, I love the question around, financial aid and access. This is a big area for us at the Chancellor's office, really, again, pushing on walls that have been put into place that advantage some students over other students, right? So we are very much focused on true cost of college, right? How do we ensure that all of our students, no matter how they enter our system, that they have the financial support to not only afford tuition and be able to interact with our institution, but to live and survive, right? Students cannot focus on what is happening in the classroom if they're trying to figure out where their next meal is coming from. So that's that basic needs, true cost of college, and making sure that no matter where our students enter into our system, they have the supports both outside of the classroom and within the classroom to be successful. And then we can focus on the work of how do we establish clear pathways for them of how they're going to perhaps enter a non-credit and then have a clear pathway to a particular credential, a particular certification, or into credit, and also on to transfer. So that's another essential piece of the work here.
Thank you very much. So the next question that I see has to do with AB 705. As you know, enrollment is not where we would like it to be. There are many colleges who are voicing concerns about enrollment because of COVID and the current situation that we have. In many households, it's true that all hands are on deck. We don't have money to pay the rent. Please make sure you get the job first before you go to college. And I think we are bearing the fruit of those decisions. So how would you see the push of this moving students to the higher level? And again, in many cases, faculty feel that students are not always necessarily ready. Considering those circumstances, what is the future for AB 705? What is there to, what would be, from your perspective, good advice, guideline to continue the process?
No, thank you. That's a great question. So I'm really going to lean into this one. I apologize in advance because I may say something someone doesn't like. When we really think about AB 705 and really equitable placement, right? Ensuring that we are tearing down barriers to opportunity for students, right? And hearkening back to that very first slide on the vision for success, that one of our goals is to pair high expectations with high support, right? So giving students that access to those transfer level courses is about that high expectation. Right, we fundamentally must challenge our underlying mindset around students' readiness, right? All students are ready. All students can learn at high levels. The question is, are we ready to support them? Right, so we have got to shift that. We have got to push against that ideology that there are the ready students and the not ready students. There are students who can handle that level of learning and students who cannot, right? And I push us strongly on this one. That is a lingering vestige of institutional racism. We have to call it what it is. It's a lingering vestige of institutional bias where we want to sort and categorize students based on their readiness, which unfortunately, and to be very honest, is often correlated with something about their background, whether it be their socioeconomic status, their race, or whatever the case may be. So we need to face that as what it is and really be bold about confronting that. And really be bold about leaning into what I strongly believe is a moral imperative. All students are ready. All students can learn at high levels. What then are we going to do to support them, to differentiate education, to be more individualized and personalized, to support them in that process? Now, again, I have been a faculty member. I know what that work means, right? I know what that work means, but it's the work that I leaned into as a faculty member because I had a clear understanding. I am there to serve my students. And with grave sacrifice, right? You do everything that you can to serve them at the highest level possible. So I don't want to be ignorant of the demand on faculty and what that means, the sort of time and effort you have to put in to do that well. But I always say this to educators: you are in a service industry. We are here to serve our students, and that is about their heart, their mind, their future. We are doing God's work as far as I'm concerned. We certainly don't get paid or appreciated at the level that we should for the work that we are doing. But the work that faculty are doing is the single most important thing happening on our campuses. It is difficult, it is hard, but we have to lean into it. Now, having said that, our institutions then also need to do a good job, a strong job, a more effective job of then supporting our faculty. What support do faculty need? What professional development and technical assistance do faculty need? I'm going to say something very controversial. Someone might send me a nasty email, but what does an appropriate faculty load look like for a faculty member to be able to operate at the levels that we want them to operate at, right? To do all of this work of differentiation and studying and researching workforce demands and developing authentic learning experiences and performative assessments. What do we need to do to support faculty in that? But really want to strongly push us to lean into a unified understanding that we must be ready for our students. They don't need to be ready for us.
Excellent. I'm receiving a lot of very positive comments of support. We really appreciate those statements that are really of utmost importance for us. With that, if I could please ask, we are almost at 10 o'clock. If others from perhaps our planning team have any questions, or if you would like to make any additional comments. Okay, I think we are ready to go. So, Dr. Lowe, thank you so much for your leadership, for your support of the event. It's just been spectacular. Again, this is certainly fireworks here. So I'm grateful for the inspiration and for pointing us in the right direction. I am sure we are going to be speaking about those issues in the next 2 days. I appreciate your leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.